My friends, welcome to this episode of the Outdoor Gear Review. I hope you all are doing well. It is a cold, windy day out here at Lone Wolf Mountain, and everyone, I love it. Anyways, what I have here is a tent from a company known as MC TOMOUNT. This is their 4-person, they claim it's a 4-season cabin tent. It is a cabin tent. Technically, you could fit 4 people in there. I wouldn't recommend it, but no, this is not a 4th season tent. A 4th season tent is a tent that you use in the wintertime in the cold conditions. That does not mean all 4 seasons, it means in the 4th season. Anyways, with that out of the way, let me just say this. I've begun testing out this tent and I like it a lot. In this episode, I'm going to show this tent to you, go over all of the features and functions of this shelter, and I'm going to share with you all the experiences that I have testing out this tent so far. So far, in really nasty conditions. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me. Let's just go ahead and let's get started. To start off here, let's discuss the storage bag. So what we have here is a storage bag that has 2 grab handles, 2 compression straps, and a single zipper across the top. Here we have the large pole to set up this tent with. Here we have the tent body and the fly. Both are integrated. And here we have the tent stakes and the guy lines. Additionally, we have some sort of advertisement booklet. Also, we have setup instructions on the inside of the storage bag. I should say this, everyone, when it comes to the pole here, it is incredibly thick and strong. It's interesting, this tent is a 3-season tent, meaning that you use this in the warmer to cool months. But yet, the poles are for like a 4th season tent. Without a doubt, this is a very storm-worthy tent. Once you have the pole in place, move over to the clips. If you let go of the pole, it will fall over, so you have to act fast. It needs to be mentioned, folks, if you decide to purchase this tent, when it comes time to put the pole in place, on the very bottom on the inside, there's this little nub. That nub connects to a clip on each side of the tent here. I mentioned this little nub here because it's important to have those nubs facing down when you install these poles. Otherwise, you have to disconnect everything and flip it. The ground here is frozen solid. The first thing that I want you all to do is to take a look at this tent. Look at the size of it. Look at the shape of it. While you're looking at this tent, know that every single side that you're looking at is also a doorway. That's right, folks. This tent has 4 doors. 2 of the doors have vestibules, and the other 2 doors are awnings. To specify, this is an awning. This here is a door. On the other side is a door. And on this side, the back side, this is another awning. Basically, you can unzip both of these panels, get some poles, stake them out, and you have awnings. You can have an awning just like this. Without a doubt, this is a very unique tent. It has features that I have not seen in any other tent, especially at this price point. Folks, I'll tell you what, before going any further, let's go over some stats real quick so you all understand exactly what this tent is. What you're looking at here is the MC TOMOUNT 4-person cabin tent. Technically, yes, you can fit 4 people with pads inside of this tent, but it's my recommendation 2 people inside of this tent plus gear. You can have 2 people with cots and there's space left over for gear as well. Again, the company claims this is a 4th season tent that is designed for the winter time. That is simply not true. On the inside of this tent, you have so much mesh, there's so much airflow. Trust me, This is not a tent that you want to use in the wintertime, not in a location that's cold anyways. Again, this tent has 4 doors. Every single side is an access point. You have 2 official doors, 2 awnings. When the tent is stored, it is 23.6 inches long and 13.4 inches wide. In a minute, we'll go over the setup dimensions. As far as the materials go, you're looking at a 20 denier nylon fabric, aluminum poles, aluminum stakes, and the tent does feature YKK zippers. The waterproof rating of this tent is a very impressive 3,000 millimeters. The weight of the shelter is 8 pounds. The retail price of this tent is $230. At the time of filming, it's $184. And that is what I paid for it. If you decide to purchase this tent, this is what you're going to receive. The tent, the storage bag, the large pole, 6 guy lines, and 16 tent stakes. One thing I do want to point out here, folks, is the vestibule space. There's not much here. The fly pulls away from the body, but that's about it. In my opinion, this vestibule space isn't very usable. Before we go to the inside of the tent, let's focus on the outside. When it comes to every single one of these doors, basically we have an upside down T formation. So we have 3 zippers, 1 vertical, 2 horizontal. And again, that's the same all the way around this tent. Every single zipper has a storm flap. So when it comes to the doors, there's 1 storm flap over the main zipper. When it comes to the sides with the awnings, there's 2 storm flaps that go over the zippers. At the very top of this tent, we have 2 vents, 1 on each side. When it comes to the pole itself, I've mentioned how burly it is. At the same time, it needs to be mentioned that this pole is exposed to the elements. So if it's raining, this pole is going to get wet. If you were out in an ice storm, this pole would get wet, it would cover with ice, and it would be a true pain to break this down. This is just another reason why this is not a 4th season tent. This is not a wintertime tent. Looking at the inside of the tent here, you can see that we do have quite a bit of fabric, but at the same time, a ton of mesh. We have 2 large mesh panels for the doors, and that's the same on every single side of this tent. At the same time, we do have a very aggressive bathtub floor, especially at the doors. Here on the sides, it juts up about 8 inches. On the other side with the doors, we're talking about almost 20 inches. This is, everyone, a single wall tent that has amazing ventilation. And I can tell you all this, the condensation control inside of this shelter is amazing. Typically, when you have a single wall tent, the condensation's really, really bad. That is not the case with this shelter here. Just in case you do not know this, a single wall tent is where the body and the fly are together. There's just 1 layer. With your typical 3-season tent, you have an inner that has some fabric, some mesh, and then you have a fly that goes over the top. With a single wall tent, all of those components are integrated together. This tent is not freestanding. You do have to stake this out, all 4 corners and at the doors. Technically, you can get this to stand up without staking it out, but the first breeze that comes through, it's just gonna push this thing over. It really does need to be staked out for it to be fully secure and storm worthy. Let's go ahead and let's enter the inside of this tent here. At the same time, I'll show you all how these doors work. Know this, every single door operates the exact same way. So again, we have 2 horizontal zippers and 1 vertical. From there, you can roll up the mesh panels. Entering the tent is nice and easy, as you can see here. When you're on the inside, we have 4 mesh pockets. All of the seams are taped. There are no hooks, no gear nets, or anything like that. As far as the dimensions go, let's go ahead and measure. Lengthwise, we are looking at 7 feet 2 inches, 88 inches in other words. Widthwise, and I'm talking about usable width, the corners here are rather sharp. We're looking at 6 feet 7 inches or 79 inches in total. The peak height here is right at 49.5 inches, which is just a little bit over 4 feet. Now everyone, it's time to go over my impressions of this shelter and my experiences as well. As far as quality goes, this is a very well-made tent for the money. I will have to say though, there are a few loose threads here and there, nothing that's going to cause any issues with this tent and nothing I'm worried about. With that being said though, I've definitely seen better from this company. As far as the setup process goes, it's not bad. It takes a little bit of time, especially by yourself. Make sure when you put this pole on top of the tent that those nubs are pointing downwards. That is crucial. Otherwise, you'll have to take everything apart and then flip it. Next everyone, this tent is massive. This is a very large tent. It's not super tall. Of course you can't stand up inside of it, but it is very long and also wide. So if you're a taller individual, this is something to consider here. For the most part, getting in and out of this tent is easy. I will say this though, let's say that you've used this tent out in the rain. There's a little bit of condensation forming on the inside here. Getting in and out of this while staying dry is difficult. You basically, when you unzip this, unless you roll the doors up, you have to slide through those doors. So if the inside material is wet, if the outside material is wet, it's going to get you wet as you enter and exit. Again, unless you roll the doors back. As far as space goes, again, I think this really is a palace for 2 people, but you can make 4 work. 4 sleeping bags side by side. There won't be any space for anything else, but you can get 4 people inside of this shelter. The sweet spot, in my opinion, is 2 or even 1, but 2 people both having their own cot, space in the middle, that would totally work because this tent is that big. When it comes to ventilation, it is truly amazing inside of this shelter. You have 2 vents up at the top. You have mesh surrounding this tent, and that's another reason why this is not a 4th season tent. This tent allows for too much airflow inside of it. I tried keeping this tent warm with a small butane lantern and it simply could not do it. That lantern is enough to heat up most tents, but not this one. Again, because it has so much mesh and the airflow is so good. With that being said, in the summer months when it's warm out, that's exactly what you want. You want a tent that allows for air to come inside of it. This is it right here. Because we have such good airflow inside of this shelter, condensation is a non-issue. Yes, you can have condensation build on the fly, on the walls, but it's very well controlled, especially compared to most single wall tents. As far as this tent being waterproof goes, yes it is. I have used this tent in heavy rain all night long and I've had no leaking at all. This is without a doubt a very storm-worthy shelter. We do have plenty of guy line points. Again, this tent comes with 6 guy lines, so you can anchor this down. With that being said though, this tent does have a good amount of shake to it, even when you have the guy lines securing the tent to the ground. This is a shelter that can rock in strong winds. As far as the value goes for this shelter, I think it's very good. Even at full retail price, this tent is very impressive. If you could pick it up for $184, I believe that's what I paid, that is a great deal for a shelter that's this well made, that has these features, that's this waterproof, where the ventilation is this good. This is not a wintertime tent unless you live in a very mild climate or you're going to use this in a very mild climate. But what this is a fantastic summertime tent. Spring, summer, going into the fall, we're talking about cool to hot to cool. That's where this is going to shine. If it's cold outside, it will be cold inside. And there's nothing that you could do to block the air coming inside of this shelter. For the full retail price, I think this is a major go. For the sale price, I think this is a major go. The only real con that I have for this shelter is this. And this is just something that you need to consider. It's not really a con of the shelter itself. This is a big tent. And when it comes time to dry this out, you better have the space for it, because this is a shelter that takes a long time to dry. Recently, I had this out in the rain, did a camping trip with it, took it home, and it took a good 20 hours to dry this out. There are so many angles, so many places where water can ingress into that will take a long time to dry. For an example, we have these storm flaps here. If water gets behind those, it can take a very long time for it to dry because the materials are coming together at such sharp angles. Again, it just takes a long time for the water to dry, and that needs to be considered. I set this up in my living room after drying it out for most of the day outside. It still wasn't dry, moved it in. I am so thankful that I have an understanding wife where I could set up a gigantic tent in the living room Anyways, that is something that you need to consider with this shelter. Do you have the space to dry it out? Do you have a location where you can set this up and leave it out for that long? Again, because it takes a long time for this to dry. Ultimately, my friends, I can easily recommend this shelter. This is a fantastic tent that's large, it's super waterproof, but again, this is a 3-season tent, it's not a wintertime tent, and at the same time, it takes a long time to dry. Comment down below, share your thoughts. What do you all think about the MC TOMOUNT cabin tent? Is this something that you're interested in? What do you like? What do you dislike about the design? If you found this episode helpful, please hit the thumbs up. I do appreciate it. I do want to mention this. This review is agenda free. I purchased this with my own money. I don't care if you buy it. I'm here to share information, and that's it. Folks, I'm done for now. Take care, be well, strength and honor. Bye for now.